Good morning, good afternoon, good day to everybody on the call. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today. My name is Steve Kazan, and I'm from the National Society of IT Service Providers, or as we like to say, the NSITSP. We have another in our webinar series this morning or today. We're going to talk about culture, and we're going to talk about process, and we're going to talk about service. And hopefully we're going to both provide some guidance and provide some discussion and answer some questions on these topics. Our presenter today, Alan Edwards, has been talking about and been interested and been studying these topics for more than a few years now, and he'll give you a little background on him. But what I expect is a pretty lively, interesting presentation. A couple of ground rules before we get started. Please put yourselves on mute if you're not on mute now. We would like to hear from you, however, and please use the chat function. If you have any questions, comments, put them there, and we'll fold them right on into our discussion today. Alan does have a set of slides that he's going to kind of walk through, but we do definitely want this to be interactive as everybody gets more out of an interactive conversation, I think, than a lecture structure. We will send out follow-up after the call. This presentation will be posted. The recording will be posted a couple different places on YouTube, in the channel, and as well as on our website. And then once Alan's done with his presentation, I have some housekeeping at the end to thank our sponsors and provide some access for where you can get more information. So with that, Alan, I'm going to hand it over to you and let you take the reins and fire away.
Thank you very much, Steve. I'm very excited to be here talking to NSITSP. I see Carl Palachuk in the audience here. He was the one who wrote the foreword for my book. Carl was always a mentor for me, and I'm supposed to paraphrase his joke without it, but Carl brought up when we were setting up this presentation that he used to put a scarecrow up on his opening slides at a graphic he had designed. He used it for 10 years. And that was what he wants for all of you, which is to be outstanding in your field. So opening joke, it's done, no more.
The dad joke. Save that, everybody.
Oh gosh, I have more jokes now. So when does a bad joke become a dad joke? When it becomes apparent. There you go. I got a groan. Let's move in. I do not walk through slides. I run through them. So let's do this. LBS, leaky bucket syndrome. I love calling it LBS because it sounds just like a terrible disease, which it is. And it affects every human being on the planet. Let me explain to you what LBS looks like in your business. So you started your business, you were probably an IT tech of some sort. That covers about 80% of us. You taught your next employee, you're a bucket of knowledge. And they went off to the races, everything was great. But we're human beings and we tend to forget little things, or maybe we have our own lens, or maybe we forgot to tell them something. And so over time, the bucket just leaks a little bit more and a little bit more. And as we continue to scale our business, we keep handing this leaky bucket to the next person. And the same thing is happening. You know, again, we tell them our version of how it's supposed to be. We then listen to it through our own lens. We find our own shortcuts that we think are helpful, and maybe they are, but the bucket of original knowledge just keeps leaking until eventually you get to your happy new employee who is no longer happy because you're not happy with him. You're not getting the results that you expect. He's not being rewarded for getting his job done well. And so he's sad. And we have to figure out how to fix sad little red shirt guy, because this is what LBS causes. Now, remember, as I started with, there is no cure for the leaky bucket. For human beings, we can't fix it. And so until AI robots take over, this is what we're stuck with. We can, however, continue to put things in the bucket. We have to keep the bucket full. Processes are a great way to fill the bucket, and we're going to talk a lot about that today. Your team member onboarding is a great process to fill the bucket initially. Tracking KPIs is an always-on visual reminder of how am I doing to my job, so you know what expectations are at all times. So another great way to fill the bucket. And of course, coaching is a great way to keep the bucket full. And of course, my conjecture is that all of these are actually process. And managing to process is the waterfall that continuously fills the bucket, ensuring a consistently positive result. Making Red Shirt Guy happy. Yay! Now, I used 3 terms that I'd like to define in my own words here. So we stay clear on this. First of all, what is a process? This is the one slide I'm going to read to you. It's a series of actions that leads to a particular result. That's all it is. It doesn't have to be complicated. Documentation, and this is more my vocabulary than the dictionary, a written form and an accessible place of the decisions you have made. So again, documentations are recording decisions. And culture, the whole slide intro is about building a culture, and I finally decided to look it up recently. What the heck is culture? It's a widely accepted way of doing something of a particular group of people. So your business is your group of people, and that means that every business has a culture, whether it's from written processes or not. However you tend to do things, that is your culture. You will also see that I use process and documentation pretty interchangeably, because I feel like process is not easy to remember who said what to who unless you have it documented. And the other reason I like to mix those words together is because, I lose my train of thought. A process, when you decide to do something a certain way, that's that decision that you're documenting. And that's why I like to change those 2 out, because it's a decision that you've made to do things this way. So how do we start a culture of process? Well, if anybody who knows me knows I'm a little bit on the OCD side, so we got to start with the process, which I know you're probably chuckling, rolling your eyes. This is almost a dad joke waiting to happen. But it's far better than when I typed in procedure the first time I came up with this in 2004. Got rid of some syllables for us. So the process is basically the blueprint to your documentation and processes. It answers the thing that you learned in grade school: the who, what, when, where, why, how, the 6 interrogatives, or the 5 W's and an H. The why, I think it's pretty easy. The why is, this is the blueprint for everything. This helps us understand how we're going to create processes and documentation, and that why is paramount. Everybody has to understand that to continue forward. I'm going to go ahead and cover where on this crowded slide as well. Where is a very simple decision. Please don't complicate it. Pick your platform, whether it's SharePoint, IT Glue, Hoodoo, Confluence. I've now used them all. Google Drive, Rolodex. Some are better than others for our industry, but as long as you decide and are consistent, you can get some value out of this. A little more conversation about when do we document, and there's a couple of variables here just to start thinking about. One, I look at businesses, MSPs, as having about 4 different maturity modes. I call it the Eureka maturity model. There's some guidelines there. But I think when you're in this early seedling stages, you should allow everybody to document as they go all the time. Are there risks that somebody might type something wrong? Yes. Hire the right people, put in some controls to review it. But in this day and age, almost all of these documentation platforms that I've mentioned have the ability to very easily roll back changes, see who changed what when, see activity logs. And I think it's worth it letting everybody make the updates as they go. You're going to get much more mileage on that. Now, obviously, things get a little more difficult as you come down the maturity modes. And at some point, you are going to have to introduce a change management process. Yes, that does happen. And in the middle, You're going to have some sort of compromise. For example, a very common early on one is, hey, we have a lot of processes around how we run the business or HR. And those are almost never changing unless we had a major meeting about it. So let's put those under a change management process instead and leave the rest live for everyone to work on. So that's how that find your maturity and figure out how much change management you need in that process. Somehow I'm missing a really awesome slide. I'm going to back up and say one of my favorite slides that's missing is the who. And you should pick somebody to be in charge of your documentation. This does not have to be the same somebody who's in charge of the technical, is this platform working? This doesn't have to be the person who documents the most. And it certainly doesn't have to be a full-time job, unless you're very, very large. But somebody needs to have the responsibility of, is the documentation system in order? Meaning, do all the SOPs, are they in the right folder? They're browsing, they care what it looks like. Honestly, if you're a 20-person MSP, this is probably a job that takes 30 minutes to an hour a week. Maybe it's a little more at first while you're getting it together. And I like to call them the documentation czar. And my cute little slide said, "Czar, you serious?" But anyways. Oh, I gotta laugh. Uh-oh. More's coming. Now for my one crowded slide, the how of documentation. I'm going to leave this up here for a minute for you to peruse on your own. And with certain documentation platforms, you can make a series of templates. And so one, you have the general rules of how to document. In my example here, I like to include in my document titles slang. Why? Because we actually speak in slang, so why not put it in a title so we can find it and search for it? I also like to include the long form, because that should always be accurate, and then we know what we're searching for. Like, hey, I'm looking for ConnectWise Manage. I'm at PSA now. Search those terms to find that in your documentation. I put both. I like to put in parentheses after my title any other search term that I might come up with, so my titles are easier to search. I did this yesterday. I'm filling in for our tech support agent at Gozenta. And I couldn't find an article, and somebody pointed it out for me, and then I added the term that I searched for at the end. And if you notice that the little leaves here, those leaves actually relate to maturity levels. You can create different types of templates. For example, if you're an early maturity and you're using Word and SharePoint, all right, we'll make some sort of basic style guide for how these are written. If you're using IT Glue or Hoodoo, their default headings and text sections, if set up properly, work great for organizing, but tell your team to use those. Or some might upload this type of document or put everything in the title. Go ahead and be clear, or even better yet, use a template. I love Carl's question that I happened to catch at the right time. Do you use keywords or embed keywords into the document title, or both? I absolutely do both. I do create some rules on how I title things that typically include the long form name. And then I put in parentheses off to the side any short form names or any time I've ever searched for it and wish that document would have come up. So I do embed those keywords, and various platforms also have different keyword features as well.
So Alan, along those lines, question for you about a glossary and acronyms. So I worked at a place where the company created a glossary and we shared it together, and it became kind of our culture to add new acronyms as they popped up.
That is a great idea. That comes back to making a decision and documenting it, because that decision is we are going to allow speaking in acronyms, and therefore you keep it up to date so you stay there. I have some documents that I have some acronym descriptions on, but I've never done a company-wide acronym document before. I know in the IT world, we have a lot of well-known acronyms. I think we also tend to make up a bunch just for our company.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Great comment. So create your own how. It doesn't have to be complex. This is the most complex thing that I have with a full page of a wall of text in our process. So the whole point of this presentation is to talk about not how to write processes, how to create processes, or even why. It's how to create a culture of process. And this is the harder part. Processes should be easy. You can download them from all sorts of sources, the Tech Tribe, the Eureka community, Reddit, Google. I'm sure NSITSP has some options as well. But to understand process, we have to build our 3 layers. One, the first most important layer is core values. The reason core values are important is because they are the ultimate process. Every company has core values, even if they're not written down. If you're a smaller company, core values are typically exhibited through the behaviors of the owner or the principal. As you get larger, you tend to need to write those down and build them into your processes and cultures to communicate those, absent of seeing how the owner behaves on a day-to-day basis. Especially if you're just starting your journey, you're not going to have a process for everything yet, which makes core values even more important, because if you have those 3 to 5 things that you must always be and do, then that makes life so much easier to judge what should I do in this case when I don't have a process. I then like to create some middleware, a middle layer called ways to succeed. And I have a funny slide about that in a little bit, of how it got the name ways to succeed. But ways to succeed as middleware is I take company behaviors, well-known company behaviors, and I map them directly to core values. So what are some common ones? And everybody's list is a little bit different, but our template has about 13 on there right now. One is, if it's not in your PSA, it didn't happen. A second related one, if it's not in your documentation platform, doesn't exist. Well, how do those behaviors map to your specific core values? Maybe it's a quality core value. Maybe it's a continuous improvement core value. Maybe it's a consistently positive results core value. Map those directly. Some other previews of ways to succeed would be admit mistakes. I love mistakes. As long as it's not the same one over and over again. If you can admit them, we can get ahead of it. We can learn from it. We're all good. If you don't do those things, then we can't fix it. You're eroding trust, and it's bad. And then that's when processes come into play once you have your general behavior. So what you don't want is to have to write in your process, don't forget to document your time in your PSA. So creating that middleware helps you prevent from having to be repetitive in your processes and tell them every little thing. You want to give them general guidance along with specific processes, because if we just had processes without core values, without ways to succeed, you're creating robots who aren't free thinking. I can't emphasize that enough, because every time I work with a client, they start with no processes, then they swing over to too many processes that spell everything, and then people stop thinking and they can't handle change. All right, quick funny slide for you. What's in your name? I told you ways to succeed had a funny story. I was actually quite pissed off the first time I had to write that over a decade ago. And I posted it on the board, much like Martin Luther did, on the door to the service department, and it said 10 ways not to get fired. And then I was like, oh, it's a little bit harsh. So I got biblical. All right, we want guiding principles, like the Bible. And then I realized that okay, it's got to be more positive than that. So 10 ways to succeed, great. And then, of course, it became 12. And I'm about to show you another analysis ways to succeed. And coming up, I'm going to show you another process, which started out as the discipline process. And then after a year and a half of working with that, we called it the coaching system. So wording matters. Finding ways to present everything in a positive, even if you're working on your core values. Get rid of all your negative words, your buts, your though, we're not this. Stick to what we are, what we do. All right, here comes the hard part. Brace yourselves. So you've written all of these processes. And then people stop following them. So back when this was the discipline system, it was kind of like, verbal warning, written warning, probation, termination. We decided to make it more positive and bring this further forward. We're all human beings. We all have this leaky bucket. It's okay to remind your team that they didn't meet expectations, or that we have a written process for this that wasn't followed. There are only two ways to make a mistake in my companies and what I teach, and that is failure to live up to core values or failure to follow a process. So I want you to imagine now, when you have this problem, a technician commits a faux pas, the first thing you have to figure out is, did they violate a core value, or did they fail to follow a process? And I think in your early days, you'll find it many times like, oh, the process was actually very unclear or did not exist. Now you don't have a lapse. You have a quick project to sit down with that technician and fix the process together, to write the process together. And what a much more positive experience. Likewise, whenever somebody asks a question about something, they're unclear what to do, your answer always has to be with a process. And I'm going to go ahead and tell this story to give you a clue how it works. So Ben, he's one of our senior consultants, been with us for over a year now. He's on vacation today, lucky him. First 3 months he worked for us, he would message me every day like, hey, I have a question about this, or how do I do this? And my answer was, I tried not to be flippant because I was busy. My answer was always, I grabbed our documentation link, I would send him the link, but I also had read my SOP real quick and said, hey, Ben, here's the link to it. I think what you need is in the 3rd paragraph. But my 4th paragraph is really crappy. Could you try to improve that for me as you're walking through it? And this continued for quite some time. 3 more months in, he sends me a message in Teams, and it says, hey, Alan, I wanted to let you know that I had a question, but I remembered you always send me back to our documentation platform. So I did. I went there and I found it. Thank you. I mean, see how Steve's smiling? That's how I was smiling too. It was just the Teams chat. I was like, oh my gosh, it's working. And he was never a problem employee in the first place, but he had a lot of questions and they got answered. And when he saw our culture, meaning our collective behaviors of going back to the documentation, he did that. When it comes to technicians and our clients, though, I do find that sometimes there's some resistance, and it's because when we remind people, we're not reminding them based on the documentation. We're saying, yeah, I told you there's a process for that. Get back to work. It's not going to work. You have to point them back to the process and show that is the source of truth. So I like to document this process privately. I have a OneNote that I keep, where I was like, hey, I had to go behind, technician A and remind them that, this is how we do our time entries, or this is how our statuses work. And then the second time, I'm like, hey, let's get back in here and let me walk you through the SOP, maybe do some screen shares, make that work with you. Third time, like, hey, we've talked about this several times now, even besides our initial introductions. So this is a problem that you need to fix. So now we're getting a little more serious. Before you go into a written warning, and for those that have perhaps a service manager, and the service manager may or may not have firing authority, usually with a written warning, I also get the owner involved or the president involved or an upper, just so they can see that it's serious. I might move into a probation period where like, hey, you have 90 days that this behavior can't happen again. And this is where you let them know that their job is in jeopardy. This is a problem. And then there's the hideous T word. Now, I typically get a lot of negative feedback about using the word termination. People think I'm very pro termination, and I'm not. First off, if you treat this process serious enough that it can lead to termination, I think that will head off all the problems to begin with. However, this is the number one excuse that I get for why an owner might come to me and complain every day for hours about a certain technician. Like, oh, I can't stand this. They do this. Other people are taking up their bad habits. Like, well, why don't you fix this problem since your coaching hasn't worked? Well, I can't afford to lose this person. In my entire history, I've probably been involved in a couple of hundred firings in my life. I have never seen anybody regret it. Not once. Now, I'm sure that's relying on human behavior, that they always delay too long anyways. But I've never seen anybody regret the firing. And I've also found a really cool observation, let's call it. It's the 80-10-10 rule, not quite Pareto's principle. When you start building your culture process, there's going to be some feelings about change. Change is scary. But once you start with your coaching system, 80% of your team is going to act right. They're going to appreciate the clarity of structure. It's going to be great. That's group A. In group C, on the other end of the spectrum, you have 10% of people who probably aren't going to make it. So if you're a 20-person firm, you have 2 people who are probably in serious jeopardy. And if you don't follow the coaching system toward termination, and again, some of those can be saved on the process because it's that serious to you. Some might not be saved, but how you act on that group is going to determine what happens to group B. The other 10%, they are kind of in the middle. They're not going to go along with it just because you said there's a change. They're seeing how serious you are about it. I don't know why, but Group C always feels to me like there's some tier 3 techs that end up in here. Some of your higher end engineers who think they're above it all. And so many times I see you go one of 2 ways. Somebody can't afford to lose this person, and then 2 other people quit because they don't want to work in this environment anymore with those 2 people. I've seen it myself. I almost imploded my company once for not taking care of the bad apples. And then I lost my good staff. And then after that, I realized, well, shoot, I need to fire my bad staff too, even though I'm already hurting. And it's amazing how much workload was freed up, and it didn't reflect poorly on me at all by getting rid of the bad apples. Or as a former colleague used to say, pruning is part of gardening. I don't like terminating. I don't, I promise. All right, so in summary, and here comes the questions, I'm ready for them. I implore you to get started. Start with your process if you don't have one. I'm pretty sure we're arranging to give you guys a copy of our template. I also have a really cool offer for you that's going to cost you like $6 to get access to everything. Start documenting your decisions, whatever they are. Document them in your platform. And then that's when you start managing to the coaching system. Manage to the documentation. Sorry, use the coaching system. Oh, great point, Bob. Yeah, if you're following the coaching system, they won't be surprised when they're fired. In fact, in my one personal example, the last place that I was an employee of, I had 2 tier 3 engineers who were a problem. The owners were convinced it was probably just my personality and not them. I finally introduced the coaching system, and by the time we got to that last step, I was very worried the owners weren't going to back me up. The two tier 3s quit. And when that happened, my whole team came to me, congratulated me, and offered to put in overtime if needed to take care of the load. It turns out overtime was needed for 1 week, and we were right as rain. I had no regrets. So if you would do me the honor of purchasing our book, and I'll even tell you how not to purchase it if that's your thing. There is a coupon code in the front page and the back page to get access to theeurekacommunity.com for free for 30 days. If you do that, you can download all the systems that I talked about in this presentation and more. I'm not going to be upset if you use the free code and then bail. That's fine. And for those of you who really don't have $6, if you go to Amazon, look at the book preview. That page is in the book preview as well. My special gift to you.
Okay.
All right.
Let's jump through some questions. I had a few, and maybe folks on the chat have a couple as well. Too many processes. What are your key indicators of that? What sort of behaviors do you see if you think your employees think you have too many processes?
So we're not stating that too many processes is a fact. We're stating that the opinion of your team is too many processes. This could be, I wonder if they are getting chastised for not using a process. So did we make it easy to find? So in your process, you're going to have a, where do we store our SOPs? And we're going to have, how do we title them, which should make them easy to find. So I would sincerely ask, do we have processes easy to find first off? What I see more common than too many processes is too detailed of a process. And I will give a quick tip on that one, which is training documents are different than SOPs. If you try to create an SOP that teaches somebody how to do something, I will never look at that document again once I've learned it, because it's too much text. An SOP should be very brief and to the point. Assume a trained individual. It's great to have training docs, great for onboarding. Maybe link that to the SOP itself, which is, here's the 5 highlights you need to know to be successful at this task.
Okay. Question from Bob. Your opinion on using video, such as walkthrough of a process with a video or audio instruction?
Hey, Bob, thanks for asking. I love videos. However, I would put those in the training document and not the SOP itself. I've even had some who will actually put the SOP at the top, like the steps to follow, and put the training information at the bottom, including the video at the bottom as an option. But to think about it, if you want staff to follow an SOP every time they do it, it has to be very easy to read and follow at a glance.
Okay.
My SOPs tend to start out larger when I'm teaching myself, and then I consolidate.
And you come back. So rolling back to your culture czar.
Those documentations are.
Documentations are. All right. So the person in your organization or multiple people, right? It could be a committee, it could be a handful of people. The place I worked at years ago, they had a culture group, and they all got fired up and very excited. And they had a lot of fun because they ran events and things. But they had suggestions related to things like logistics and values and sort of formal rules and informal rules, documentation as a culture, right? Process as a culture. How do you coach that culture, either person or culture committee, right? How do you get them to focus on, producing ideas and then communicating those ideas?
I don't normally subscribe to the idea of a culture committee. I'm not opposed, but many times I think what's happening is leadership and management have failed to communicate core values consistently through their organization that way. And they're adding a Band-Aid by doing the culture committee. Now, don't get me wrong. I much prefer somebody add a Band-Aid than ignore it, either through not caring or through not knowing. So it's a great Band-Aid. Apply the Band-Aid while you figure the rest out. But core values should be everywhere. And whole different topic for how we run meetings. But your meetings also need to be very inclusive, and there needs to be a meeting with, at some level, everyone has to have a meeting somewhere, which not only includes how am I doing, but like, what can we improve on? How can we make your life easier?
Yeah, right. So employees provide suggestions up to management. Management sets the core values, which then flow down through the company.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Colin, what are your views on gamification systems to provide little rewards? Do they work? Do they motivate people? Or does it feel like pandering?
Well, motivation is temporary. Inspiration is forever. Um, Gamification can work short term. I don't like it long term. To me, for what I like to do, it builds the wrong type of culture. Uh, I certainly love having KPIs and numbers, but I'm more concerned with an individual having their target. Uh, some business owners don't like me saying this, but I believe that some KPIs are good enough. Meaning, let's say you have average resolution time, a fun IT metric. I have some clients who are striving to get below 8, some below 4. I have one aiming for below 2 hours. You know, he hits 2.1. His really says, like, you know, so a lot of other areas of the company we could be improving upon, versus constantly antagonizing the tech team to work faster, which is really where they're at that below 2 hour mark for average resolution time. Now, obviously, they've done good work to even get that close. But I felt like there was a good enough point where we were doing great. Let's go and improve other areas and congratulate people for a job well done. So beware of gamification.
Okay. Any more questions from the group in the chat? All right. Let me just share. If I can figure out how to share here. Yeah, here we go.
Hiding.
Yeah, we're gonna. I got it. You'd think I know how to do this after the first 6,000 times.
I can never find it in Zoom.
I just wanted to kind of wrap up with a couple of slides, and let me just go into my slideshow view here. As we normally do, we want to thank our sponsors, all the folks vendors, partners that support the NSITSP. Get a huge virtual handshake and our sign of gratitude. If anyone out there knows of any other sponsors that would be useful, valuable, and beneficial to both us and them, please let us know. The legislative committee talks once a month on legislative affairs. So this schedule's up on the NSITSP website. If you want to talk legislation, regulation, this is a really interesting conversation. A lot of this regulation is done at a state level, not at a national level, but there are always more things to talk about. Discussions. If you want more information about the organization, you want to see our social media links, which we encourage you to populate and provide content on. Please go to those places and link and like the organization. And here's some more useful sites for you. So who are the vendors? Who are the resources? How to find membership and pick what type of members you're going to be. And the recording for the meetings, this particular session, we'll get it recorded and we'll post it. So those of you who have people in your organization who would find it really interesting, useful to talk about process-driven culture, we will send out a message of where to get that link and how to share it with your coworkers. And so finally, just like to say thank you very much. We appreciate your time. We know you're running a business out there. We know you're managing people. So the fact that you joined us today means a lot to us. So with that, I would ask that we wrap up. And Nicole, you can press the red button again, and we can finish up and let everybody get on with their busy day.